All right, that's it. Sylvia, tell the kids their saltwater aquarium has to go. When I was an undergraduate down at the University of Albany, we had a very large animal room in the basement, probably similar in size to the lab, and full of tanks. Different people doing research on there. It had different, aquatic animals in there. And there was a doorway in the back that went out to the greenhouse. And next to the doorway to the greenhouse was a big saltwater tank with an octopus in it. And there was a guy whose job it was to take care of the animal room. There's no animal room there, no guy anymore. But when he came in the front door, big room, lots of noise, tank way in the back, the octopus would come over to the glass, look out, and if it was the guy, wouldn't do that for anybody else, if it was the guy, stick a tentacle out and wave at him. Not a huge sign of great intelligence, but just the fact that he stayed in the tank was showed some intelligence. Octopus tend to be great escape artists. They can, since they don't have a shell either on the outside or the inside, squid have a kind of an internal shell, they can squeeze through incredibly tight spaces. Many years ago, there was a mystery at the Monterey Bay Aquarium in San Francisco where fish were disappearing in the night. And so they changed all the locks, figuring, somebody who had been fired had still had access and was doing it. That didn't matter, the fish kept disappearing. And so they posted guards, nobody seemed to be coming in and out, and the fish kept disappearing. Now, in this particular area, there was a big ring of tanks around a room in between where people could, take care of the tanks and feed put food in and stuff. One of the tanks had an octopus in it, pretty tightly sealed, because octopus are great escape artists. But the octopus, there was a latch on the lid, and the latch was always on there. And he couldn't squeeze out under the lid. So I went, okay, let's put a camera in there. Somebody's getting in, because they got to get into this central room in order to get these fish. This will catch them. Here's what the camera picked up. In the dead of night, there was just enough room around the lid that the octopus could get a tentacle out, grab a hold of the latch, open the latch, move the lid, went across the floor, went into a fish tank, had itself a nice dinner, went back across the floor, went into the tank, reached up, pulled the lid shut, reached its tentacle up, and reattached the latch. So it was smart enough to know that if the latch was open and left open, they would know what had happened. And so it reattached the latch. There are a number of instances of this in octopus and squid. Squid use their chromatophores in squid that are schooling, which they aren't all. They will use their chromatophores to produce all sorts of complex moving patterns. And they're basically talking to other squid. We're not really sure what they're saying. I saw a film once of a squid. One of the most studied types of squid is the schooling squid that lives in shallow water in the Caribbean, where it's nice and sunny, nice and warm. And so the researchers can go out and know where the squid are going to be, because they don't wander around. They're territorial. So the researchers, you got the cameraman, and you've got these squid, and then there's a couple of squid off to the side. Typically, they're kind of beige, because the background is, the bottom's kind of sandy and the background's kind of beige, and that's the way that they look. And right now, there are no predators around, so they're just kind of beige. The guy with the camera swims over toward the two squid, and then swims up over the top of them and shoots down on them. And what you can see is, here's the rest of the squid school. Here's male squid. Here's the female squid. This side of the male squid is all beige. This side is talking up this female. All sorts of patterns and colors going back and forth and back and forth. And it's like a guy who's striking out in a bar. Is the female's like, she's not really responding. But the squid The male squid was intelligent enough to know, don't let the rest of the guys know what I'm doing over here. Keep this very neutral and just talk on the side that she can see. You know, and if she responds, I guess I'll deal with that then. But they have a lot of control over these things. So here again, basic layout of a mollusk. Whether it's a snail or a clam. Here's the family tree. Now the family tree is tricky. Now a lot of the relationships are done with studying the genetics, but the fossil record is better for the groups that have shells because shells fossilize really, really well. And the width of these bars, and these are different eras of the past, the width of the bars is supposed to show how many species there are. And you've got your three big groups, your gastropods, your cephalopods, your bivalves. I'll tell you about that in a second. Your chitons, which are somewhat segmented, that's going to be important for the next group. And then some, you can see these lines are very thin. There's a couple of weird offshoot groups. But these are the three big groups. And this line gets probably narrower because the ancestral cephalopods had a snail-like shell, and the new ones don't. So this may represent them just kind of being less represented in the fossil record as opposed to having actually fewer species, because this is a pretty doggone successful group. So here's the three subgroups. There is some disagreement over just exactly how they get named. But here they are. The gastropods, stomach foots. These guys have a flat foot on the bottom, and the bottom is lined with cilia and produces mucus. Cilia, remember, are tiny little projections on cells. When they move a protozoan pretty well on a slide where they're going really fast over a tenth of an inch. These guys, they're pushing against something thicker than water. They're pushing against this mucus that gets laid down, but there's still a big limit to how fast they can go. And this is divided between the snails, who have this shell that they can withdraw into. It's pretty good at protecting them. And the slugs, who are kind of a combination of being worm-shaped. Remember, there's a great advantage to being worm-shaped. You can get in and under things you can't really get a shell into. Or they're poisonous. A lot of slugs that live in the ocean are very brightly colored, have lots of contrasty colors on them because you do not want to bite into them. They are very, very poisonous to eat. And that protects them so they don't need a shell. Some land slugs, especially around here, you'll see the ones that are white with black specks on them. You don't want to eat those either. You probably don't want to. Well, people eat snails, so I don't know of anybody that eats slugs, but somebody probably does somewhere. Now, this group has a bunch of different names. We're going to call them bivalves. These are the clams and the oysters and the mussels and the scallops. They have two shells, and the foot, for most of them, is kind of tongue-shaped, and they're sessile. They tend to sit in one place, but they can dig and they can push themselves along a little bit. But for the most part, they're not particularly mobile. So you've got the flat, mucus-covered, cilia-covered foot here. You've got the kind of tongue-shaped here, and here the foot gets very highly modified. The cephalopods, it's laid over the squid there. Their foot is split into tentacles, muscular tentacles with suckers on them. In an octopus, there's 8 equal-sized tentacles. In squid, they call the short ones tentacles and the long ones arms. They each have a pad with suckers on it, and they typically reach out and grab and pull stuff back. And these are the smart guys. Another story, another group in the squids and the octopus are the cuttlefish. Cuttlefish, which are kind of thick-bodied looking. They're very squid-like, but they're kind of thick-bodied. And many, many years ago, when my son was little, we went to SeaWorld down in Florida, and they've got a whole building where the lights are very low, and the tanks are very dimly lit for things that are typically active at night, so that they'll come out and be active. Now, I had seen a film about how cuttlefish communicate with one another. They wave their arms at each other in patterns, and they react. And so we're walking through the hallway, not a lot of people there, and there's cuttlefish in there. And I said to my son, let me try this, let me see if this works. I'd seen them react to other cuttlefish doing the little semaphore stuff on film. I was wondering if I could imitate it. So I got right up against the glass so that the light would pick me up and they could see me from inside. And I just did that. And one of the cuttlefish kind of turns and looks at me. They have this wiggly fin that they kind of very gently can push themselves. They do the jet propulsion thing, but they also can maneuver with the thing. And he comes over to the glass, and he kind of looks, and he looks at my hands, and I do a couple more. He looks, and he takes his arms, and he does it back to me. I think that's the most impressive thing I've ever done to impress my son, is that I don't know what I was saying to the cuttlefish. I don't know what the cuttlefish was saying back to me. I may have been insulting his mother, and he was, reacting, and he was pissed off. But he actually did try to communicate back to me, just with the little semaphore signals. I've tried it with the tank. There have been cuttlefish at the aquarium in Schenectady, and they will come over and watch the signaling, but I haven't been able to get one to signal me back yet. Thing about cephalopods, they don't live a long time. So you need a pretty good source of them to keep them up in an aquarium. And that's another thing, is that cephalopods break one of the rules of intelligence. Octopus especially do. If you look at intelligence in our backbone group, the intelligent vertebrates tend to be very long-lived, so the intelligence allows them to kind of learn stuff that happens and be able to deal with it when it happens later. And they often tend to be very group-oriented, where part of the intelligence is figuring out what's going on in the rest of the group. Octopus are very solitary, only live maybe 3 years. They break basically the two basic rules of intelligence, but they also don't read and they don't speak English, so they haven't listened when people show them the books or read to them like, you're not supposed to be intelligent, you break the rules. So this is what happens when we have limited input and we make rules up about what's supposed to happen. And then eventually you run into, it's biology. Biology is full of exceptions. So those are the mollusks. One nice thing about being a cephalopod, you put on your shoes, you put on your hat, and you're dressed, is that they are basically a head and a bunch of arms, and the nervous system is very kind of split, where they do have a pretty good brain, but they also have individual processors for each of the tentacles. So there's a lot of feedback and decision making that actually doesn't have to go directly to the brain. Each arm can work pretty independent of one another. It is connected to the other ones, and they are coordinated, but they are capable of doing a lot of very complex things because each arm has got its own set of processors. Okay, that's it for the mollusks chapter.